Affairs don't begin in the bedroom, they begin in childhood. In the part of you that decided she needed to bury her truth just to be loved. The part that's now screaming to be seen. I'm Alex Croxford, and this is the Deeper Love podcast, where we name the shame, face the guilt, and help you find your way back to yourself. So let's begin. I remember sitting with my therapist about 6 months after my marriage had finally ended, and me saying to her, what if I never find love like that again? What if no one loves me as deeply as my ex-husband did? And I was truly petrified that at the age of 39 at that time, that I was almost damaged goods. I had been through a divorce. I had cheated on my husband. I had also, if you have referred to my episode about the year of the clusterfuck, made some terrible mistakes with other men after the end of my marriage. And I honestly felt like perhaps I'm unlovable. Perhaps no one's ever going to be able to love me in the way that I really truly want to be loved. I remember specifically at that time wanting to be loved for who I truly was. I wanted to be loved for my heart, not just for my body or my achievements or my bubbly personality. I freaking hate that phrase. So, how did I move from being there into the deepest love I've ever experienced? Now, as some of you may know, I had chosen in that year, the year that I met Adam, to become celibate because I realized that by giving my body and my time and my energy away to men that did not deserve me, I was not loving myself. In fact, it was the opposite I was doing. I was actually really feeding my own story that I didn't matter because I was just giving myself away. I was obviously terrified as I embarked on this journey of celibacy that I was going to have to meet a man that was willing to wait for me to decide that I was ready to have sex. I was also going to have to find a man who was willing to love me beyond what I had done in my previous relationship. I am not going to pretend that that felt terrifying. And quite honestly, almost impossible. Because I am sure you all know how much society deems somebody that's cheated as broken. Like once a cheater, always a cheater, and they don't deserve love. And I mean, you only need to go through the comments on my Instagram reels, please don't, to see what the societal stories are around cheating. But I was willing to love myself enough and choose celibacy, even though the task at hand almost felt like climbing Mount Everest in flip-flops. And up until that point of celibacy, I was dating, and I had decided before I started dating that whoever I met, I was going to be completely honest with, because I could not even fathom the idea of being in another relationship in which I was having to carry a secret that was so re-traumatizing that I just knew I had to be honest. And I remember one of the first guys that I went on a date with that I shared that I had had an affair. And I do remember the fear in my chest as I opened my mouth. And I told this guy on like date one. But the reason that I did it, even though I was so scared of what he was going to say, was because of this commitment I had made that I wanted to meet somebody that loved me for who I was. I knew that meant warts and all. That meant all of the messiest parts of me that I wanted to push away and I wanted to hide. I had to let them be seen so that someone could truly see me. This is one of the problems I see time and time again with my clients and with myself, is that we have this longing to be seen. We didn't feel seen by our partners. We want to feel seen. We want to feel understood. We want to be held and loved exactly as we are. But we are not willing to show all of ourselves because there is a deep fear that if we are seen in all of our messy human selves, that we may be rejected or laughed at or abandoned. And so we pretend. And this pretense is subtle, by the way. I mean, sometimes it might be big, but if somebody had said to me 8 years ago, are you pretending in your marriage? Are you performing? Are you putting on a show? I would have said, no, like I'm just me. I'm, just being myself. But the fact of the matter is, at that time, being myself meant a lot of surface level identities that weren't actually truly who I was. I was the high achieving television executive. I had a 4-bedroom house in East London. I earned very good money. I bought myself nice handbags and designer shoes. And that's who I thought I was. I like to party and I like to spend money. And that was the way in which I was existing in my life. And I didn't know who I was any deeper than that. And I don't judge myself for that. That was exactly how I was meant to be at that time in my life. But how could I possibly expect a man to see me and to love me for my heart when I wasn't even showing them my heart? I don't think I cried more than 5 times in front of my ex-husband over 9 years until I told him that I had cheated on him, and then the floodgates opened and I didn't stop crying for a whole year. But that wasn't because he would abuse me or tell me I was being stupid or anything. It was because I felt terrified of exposing myself in a really vulnerable way in front of not only him, but everyone. And so I had this mask of perfection and this mask of the strong one and this mask of I'll be there for everybody else, but I don't need anybody there for me because I'm fine. I've got this. When we broke up and I was diving deeper and deeper and deeper in this healing journey and peeling back the layers and seeing how I had been living from this mask and how I had been unconsciously pretending to be somebody that didn't feel her feelings, or well, I wasn't someone that felt her feelings, but I had been unconsciously numbing myself from my feelings and unconsciously living this life from this very protected way, it was like I was wearing a suit of armor that nobody could get through. The more I dissolved the armor, the more I dissolved the masks, the more I was being able to call in men that could see me deeper. And when, after I chose celibacy and I started to put it out into the universe that I wanted to meet a man that I could be deeply connected with before we had sex, I didn't know how that was going to happen. I just had to let go and trust and be like, whoa, I don't know how this is going to work in my life, but this is what I want and this is what I need. And of course, Adam showed up in my life 2 months later, a man who was on his own celibacy journey, and the universe delivered. But in order for that to happen, I had to also show up on my side of the bargain. And that was in living in radical self-honesty and self-truth. Because if I hadn't, I would still be repeating the same patterns that was happening in my marriage before I cheated on him. I had been living a lie and I didn't even realize it. And I wasn't going to do that again. And so when Adam and I first met and we started to have conversations, it must have been within the first 2 weeks of us meeting. As we began to talk more and more, it was more than just hello, goodbye. I obviously told him that my marriage had ended, and I told him that I had cheated on my ex-husband and that I had been on a really deep healing journey in order to try and understand myself and to try and accept myself and, quite honestly, get into a place where I wasn't going to make that mistake again. Because that was the God's honest truth. And that's why I really embarked on this healing journey to begin with. First of all, to fix myself, which now I understand I never needed fixing. But it was to fix myself and to make sure that I never did it again. And at the time, it was so that I never did it again to my then husband. But of course, my marriage ended. And then it was, I never want to do that again to another man. I never want to break another person's heart and my own heart in the process by looking outside of my relationship. And the thing that I realized in that radical honesty was that Adam wasn't going to go anywhere. He just met me with compassion. He met me with zero judgment. It was almost like a moment of relief, to be honest, that I'd met this man who wasn't going to judge me or question me or make me feel like I was a terrible person. I'd, by that point, done enough healing on myself that I was able to attract somebody that wasn't going to mirror my own shame and my own self-judgment. Because ultimately, that's what we do. If we're still judging ourselves or still shaming ourselves or feeling the weight of guilt, if we don't really do the healing work on what it took to get us to that place, and we're still at a point of understanding why we cheated, but not having fully moved through the shame and the guilt and the confusion, the chances are you may attract another partner who is going to mirror your own internal experience back to you, because that is what we do. And don't get me wrong, there was still stuff that Adam and I had to work through. I never want to paint this perfect relationship, because there is no such thing. My belief is that relationships are here to help us grow and to help us learn about ourselves at a much deeper level. And although he did not judge me or shame me for the infidelity in the marriage, there was still work to do around some shame that I still carried and judgment that he carried around some other parts of my history. Once we had worked through that, which was not easy, but we did, the radical self honesty that I had brought to this relationship, at the risk of him leaving me or rejecting me or laughing at me, meant that we opened the door to be able to have a beautiful, honest relationship going forward. And I think so many of us, and I include me in this, by the way, try to pretend that we are someone that is cool about X, Y, Z, or someone that doesn't mind our partner working late all the time, or someone that's okay with X, Y, and Z, because we want to be easy breezy. We want to be the one that's so easy to love. I basically have no needs. I'm not going to ask for anything from you. I'm just over here being this pretty little ball of easy to love. And yet that backfires because it's not true. And I remember being with my ex-husband, we never argued, very, very rarely argued until the final year of our marriage. And I thought that that was something I should be proud of. And it meant that we were in some kind of successful relationship. But now I know that is not true. Because a marriage built on zero conflict is a marriage that's built on a lot of unspoken truths. When I first got together with Adam, because I'd now been on this very deep journey for 3 years when we met, I'd obviously done a lot of work around realizing that I wasn't able to speak my truth, that I wasn't able to be vulnerable, that I was terrified of anybody seeing me as my most raw, messy self, that I was really disconnected from my desire and my true sexuality. And when we got together, straight off the bat, I realized if I want this relationship to be different, I'm going to have to show up differently too, beyond just the radical self honesty and honesty with him. This was a challenge to my nervous system to be able to speak up when he upset me, or question things that didn't feel quite right to me, or not just push things under the carpet that I didn't want to talk about to keep the peace. And I remember being on the phone to him and having to bring up something that I felt really uncomfortable about, and it being met in a way that I'd never been met before. He didn't laugh at me. He didn't get defensive. He didn't try and change the subject. He just held his hands up and said, "Yeah, you know what? You're right. That wasn't cool. I'm sorry I did that. I don't know why I did that. That wasn't cool. I apologize." And I was, to be honest, quite thrown to begin with, because I'd never had this level of truth in a relationship. And, that period when I was living in Mexico City and I was developing a phone relationship with him ultimately was this 4-month period of real relationship growth. Because although we weren't in a committed relationship at that time, we were really getting to know each other, and I was really being challenged to see how much I could speak what I was truly feeling. And I remember there was this one particular time where I had arranged to have a video call with him. And at that time, we were just doing telephone calls and WhatsApp messages. And we were really cool with that. But I really wanted to see his face. And we'd arranged this video call. And I was super excited to have this call. I'd kind of really psyched myself up for it. And at the last minute, he felt really, really tired and didn't want to do the video call. And I remember being really upset about it, but at the same time feeling a bit ridiculous. Like, it's not a big deal, Alex. It's just a video call. You're going to speak to him anyway on the phone. What's your problem? Really tried to diminish my own experience. But I knew that if I did that this time round, I was just going to get myself back into the same pattern again of not telling my partner the truth, or the guy that I was dating the truth about how I felt. And so I took a deep breath and I sent him a message, and I told him that I felt really, I was feeling really sad that we weren't able to have this video call. I'd been looking forward to it all day. And we ended up having a telephone call about it. And I remember crying on the phone to him. And this was only about 3 or 4 months into us having met. And I remember crying to him on the phone about the fact that we had set this up and I felt let down. And honestly, that felt so vulnerable to me, to be crying in front of somebody that I really liked and that I barely knew really, and that I really wanted to hopefully be in a relationship with later. And I just let myself go. I just thought, Alex, you can't hide this like you used to, because you are not going to have the same relationship again. And that conversation was painful and hard, but also he met me and he held me. By the end of the conversation, I felt completely different, and I felt much happier again, much more positive about the future. I felt like he saw me, and I felt it, like in that honesty, we were able to grow our relationship even more. It deepened our connection because I was willing to let him see me, even if I felt ridiculous and I felt like I was being over the top. And this is ultimately what happens in relationships and what is possible after we have been through such a huge rupture as the fallout after an affair. Because if I had not have been through that with my ex-husband, I would not have woken up to all of the ways in which I was lying to myself, or all the ways in which I was pretending. And when I did, and now in this new relationship, and because I did, now in this new relationship, our connection is so much deeper. And that's why I called this podcast the Deeper Love Podcast, because I believe this to be true as a possibility for every single woman who has been through what I've been through. But the only way for that to be possible is radical self-honesty, and to get to the root of the patterns of lying to yourself, of abandoning yourself, of betraying yourself, so that you don't do it again in the next relationship. And true love feels completely different to the love that I've had before in my life. And that's not to belittle my relationship with my ex-husband. I loved him as much as that version of me was able to. And I truly believe that he was the same with me. But because I didn't let him see me, because I wasn't true to who I was, there was always going to be a limit on that love. And real love, love which meets you exactly where you are in all of you, feels so much more grounded. It feels real. It feels bizarrely far less intense. And a lot of times, and I did this right at the beginning actually of this relationship, people confuse intensity with intimacy. We think that we have to have these crazy feelings of butterflies and the kind of ache in our chest and that nervous, excited feeling all the time in order for it to be true love. But I actually learned something very different in this relationship. And that was that when that is absent, that crazy feeling, the obsessional craziness, normally that means that you're approaching safer, more consistent love, the non chaotic version, the present version of love. And so the only thing that we need to do after having been through the rupture of an affair, it's not about going off to find the next person who is going to love you differently to your husband, or just continuing into various different chaotic dating scenarios to try and numb the grief. It's actually facing inwards, holding a mirror up and saying to yourself, where have I been lying to myself? Where have I been pretending to be happy? Where have I not been admitting that I am sad or lonely or grief stricken? Who am I not telling the truth? Because I can almost guarantee that just as much as you are lying to your ex-husband or your ex-partner or your partner, if you're still together, you are also lying to yourself. And it doesn't matter whether or not you have broken up with that partner or you are still with them. This does not matter. Just because I broke up with my ex and now I'm with Adam, that doesn't mean that has to be your journey too. But the main part of the journey that is unavoidable if you want to use this as a portal is radical self honesty and healing the parts of you that believe that you have to behave in a way of X, Y, or Z to be loved. Because it's not about having to find the right person. There is no perfect person for anyone. It doesn't exist. It's a myth. It's actually about being the real person, the real, most authentic version of you, the one who allows herself to be seen, the one who messes up and holds her hands up and says, you know what? My bad. That was not cool. And finding love or experiencing deeper love after the end of the rupture of an affair isn't some kind of prize for doing all the healing. It's the expression of being healed enough to stay open to what it is that you truly long for when it comes to love and relationships. And even if you are right in the eye of the storm right now, perhaps month 1, 2, or 3, or even 6 after the rupture, there is absolutely a way for you to be able to experience the deepest love of your life after this. All you have to do is start to let yourself see yourself, get to know who you are, truly who you are, so that somebody else can see you too. And so if you are at a point, perhaps you're 2 years on, 5 years on, perhaps you're still in the affair, perhaps you just told your husband or partner and they've just found out, wherever you are, if you feel like you want to use what you are going through or you have been through to open up to a love that you didn't even know it was possible, the first place to start is by coming to the softening sessions. Because that is where we're going to start to let love back in after everything that you have been through, including the guilt and the shame that you may still be carrying. Thank you for listening to the Deeper Love podcast. If today's episode spoke to you, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you're ready to go deeper, you'll find all the ways to work with me in the show notes. Until next time.